What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of GLE. Phil Swanson back again with another awesome guest for y'all in today's episode. I'm really excited to talk to this guy. I actually met this guy on a virtual speaking event put on by our mutual friend Philip Sessions.
Yeah.
And was really excited to hear him speak for the first time at that event, and we connected afterwards. And I've been following him on social and loving what he's doing, and wanted to bring him on and share him with the GLE audience. So I'm really excited to have him here today. He has an awesome podcast, the Erik Allen Show. You can find it at erikallenmedia.com. That's Erik, ERIK, allenmedia.com. On Instagram as well, Erik G. Allen. And he's ranked in the top 5 entrepreneurs of Idaho, best of 2020 and 2021. And he has quite a life story to share, and I'm excited to learn it, get to know him a little better, and share him with you. Erik, welcome to GLE, my man.
Oh, man, I'm so excited to be here, Phil. It's such an honor to be on your show, man. I love your show, dude. You absolutely do such a great job with your guests and putting out great content, man. So truly an honor to be here, brother.
I appreciate it, Erik. So you're up in the northwest part of the country, in the beautiful, some of the beautiful country. You know, I tell people I'm down in Houston. I tell people like Houston's like, you know, your city's ugly when its claim to fame is the drainage ditch that goes through town, right? The Bayou City, and like we don't have scenery up here. So I'm a little bit jealous of you. But how'd you end up in the Northwest? Have you always been up there? Give me kind of the Erik Allen story to what brought you to the northwest part of the country and putting on the Erik Allen Show.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Tri-Cities, Washington, which is about 4 hours from here, so eastern part of Washington State. And lived there until I was 20, and then moved up to Seattle area. But had an interesting lifestyle for sure. I mean, I grew up in typical childhood, went to Sunday school, played Little League, things like that. And my dad would take my best friend Dave and I and throw us in dumpsters on the weekends and say, go find treasure. Like that was just a typical thing for our family, go dumpster diving.
Wow.
And then my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 11 years old. And that's really where things started to change pretty rapidly. My mom got together with a guy who was very physically abusive almost immediately. I remember like looking through the back of the house into the bedroom window, and he'd be hitting her with a cordless phone when those were around, you know, and I'd call the police and they would show up, and my mom would never press charges. I never understood why and why she decided to stay with that guy. And then they did the smart thing. They got pregnant. And then in the middle of my 8th grade year, they moved us from Kennewick, Washington up to Stevensville, Montana. So it was population about 1,200 people at that time. And they rented this house that was a beautiful property, 2 ponds right by the Bitterroot River. And the problem was, though, this house had 3 bedrooms. It was one for them and one for my sister, who's 4 years younger than me, and then one for my new baby brother, who's a few months old. He said, Erik, you live in the garage. So I literally had this plastic tarp down the middle of the garage that separated my bed from the truck that would pull in. Luckily, my half of the garage had a fireplace, though, so it'd keep me semi-warm in the middle of the -degree winter nights. But there's many nights where I'd wake up, 1, 2, 3 a.m. when the fire would go out, and I could see my breath, see my breath in the morning before I go into school and things like that. But there was a moment when I was about 13 years old there that really changed the trajectory of everything. They came home arguing. It wasn't anything different than any other night. And I was brushing my teeth, and I remember brushing my teeth and just feeling like God was like, dude, you've got to look around the corner to see what's going on. And so when I look around the corner, the hallway was to the kitchen, to the pantry, to the garage door where my bedroom was at. And as I peeked out there in between the pantry and my bedroom door or the garage, this guy's on top of my mom, just boom, 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 just smacking her. And I was like, man, I walked up behind him and I grabbed a cast iron pan and I swung as hard as I could, and I split the back of his head open. And he turned around and he said, what then? As he did that, I split him forehead open with another swing. And, and I hit him so hard the second time I actually fell over. And I remember him standing up over me, and he was, starting to yell. My mom jumped up like Mama Bear and, punched him like 5 times in a row. There's like blood on the wall. It's like crazy movie scene. Cops came, took him to jail. My mom doesn't press charges again. It's like this rinse and repeat, over and over again. And I actually thought I was a hero in that moment, but it wasn't the case. If we flash forward a little bit, with 3 months left in my freshman year of high school, I got kicked out of that house and I had to go stay with my buddy Forrest. And I slept on hardwood floors at his house because his dad lived in this old rickety house with no carpet. And then we would get up and we'd steal a cigarette from his pack and then, walk to school with our No Fear shirts on like we were a bunch of badasses. And we were not badasses, but we rocked the No Fear shirts like we were. And finished my freshman year of high school there, and then moved back to with my dad for sophomore through senior year. And that's really where more trouble happened there. But that was the first 15 years, man.
Wow. Sounds like you've had quite a troubled upbringing. I'm curious, whenever I hear folks like yourself tell stories like that, Erik, I feel so fortunate because I didn't have that experience growing up. And, I think for some people too, they can think like, I don't know, like maybe I'm not destined for something big, because you hear lots of people that have really cool stories that end up doing really cool things. Many of them kind of a rough story behind them. Don't you think? Or am I way off there?
No, absolutely. I think so. And I think though that testimonies like yours is a testimony itself, man. Like, growing up in a great family and things like that, and being successful like you are, I think that's a huge testimony too. But yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of people out there that if they have the right mindset, they are able to change their life and not let their past and other people's opinions define them, their future. Right. And so when they decide that, they can step into that new future, man, and start impacting lives.
So I'm curious how that experience. You're married man, for almost 20 years now, is it?
Yeah, 19 years, man. This month, March.
Congratulations!
Thank
My
you.
wife and I will be 6. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I think 6 in April.
That's awesome.
So congratulations. Marriage isn't easy. And I tell anybody getting married that even if you do wait for the right one, which I highly recommend everybody do. But it's still not going to be easy, right?
No.
Two becoming one just isn't easy, and you're different people with a whole lot of different things. But I'm curious how your upbringing. Do you think it's helped you learn what not to do, maybe, or how has it helped you in your marriage?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's definitely helped me figure out exactly what I didn't want in marriage, but I also didn't have good examples to have marriage or do marriage right. And unfortunately, my wife, she came from kind of a broken home as well. And so we brought that in. The first 5 years, we just kind of got to know each other. We didn't have any kids. We just did our own thing. And we did a couple mission trips down to Mexico, and
cool.
And I'm not a tool guy. She's a tool person. Like she was raised by her grandfather, who was a shop teacher for 35 years. And my dad always just said, pay people to do things. So, it's very interesting. Like she's definitely the tool person in the house. And, But I mean, I wouldn't be here without her for sure. I'm being married for 19 years. It's, not every year is rainbows and sunshine, man. There's a lot of, sometimes it's rough years. And, we've got kids that are 14 and 10. And when you mix kids into it changed the flow, man. And you got to figure out how to make that stuff work. And, my wife, we met because I was working at Starbucks after getting laid off from the music business. I'd been in jail at 18. I was bankrupt at 21. I mean, I was down to the bottom of the bottom. Working in the music business, getting laid off, and then working at Starbucks. And she walked in and she said, "Hey, we've got a cool college age event down at our church. Would you want to go?" And I didn't have any friends, and I was depressed, and she was good looking, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." And and it was like when I went to that event, though, that's when I realized that God had been protecting me my whole life, man. I'm 44. I've never broken a bone. I've never gotten a stitch. I've had a gun pointed at my face twice. I've been many, many times in where I should have been dead, where I just did a bunch of stupid stuff and ended up living through it. And a month later was Easter 2004. I don't think that was a coincidence, but I wake up Easter morning after, a night of partying, and I felt God say, "Dude, you're going down this path that's going to end your life. So you need to start making some changes." And in that moment, I gave my life to Christ. I quit cold turkey, drugs, stringing cigarettes, everything in that moment. And called up that girl who's now my wife and said, "Hey, thanks for inviting me to the church. Maybe I'll see you at the store sometime." And we were married 11 months later, and here we are 19 years, man.
Wow. That's wild. That's wild. Do you, quitting drugs and alcohol cold turkey like that's a pretty big thing, Erik.
Yeah.
And I just think about kind of that progression of all those big steps. And, it's kind of like it sounded like you made some really big steps all right there in a row, like in a period of like a year.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me more about what that was like. And, I think a lot of people probably today, maybe COVID was a wake up call. I know all the free time people had, they either did stuck to their routine and pushed through it and did great, or they totally fell off the wagon like I did and overate and overdrank and, had fun and probably got into some bad routines. But what would you say to the people that are maybe thinking of or trying to get out of their routines, bad routines here in 2024?
Yeah, I think the way that I had to change for myself is I had to change the environment, right? So I was hanging around with a bunch of dudes that are still really cool guys. They're good friends of mine, but I had to take a break. I literally just called them and said, dude, I got to get healthy. I got to take a break from drinking and partying. And I took about 6 months where I just like did nothing involving drinking or wasn't putting myself in an environment that I would want to. And what I did was I replaced that though with guys that I found in the church that had great marriages. They had great walks with Christ. They had great families. They were great dads, and they were great businessmen. And this is like pre-podcast days, but I would literally take them out to Starbucks. I said, tell me what you're doing today to live the life that you are, because that's what I want. Mm-hmm. And I just started feeding myself from these mentors, whether they wanted it or not. I was like, dude, I want to take you out to coffee. I want to understand your story. And so I had to change that environment. And I think if we want to make a change and get out of a toxic relationship or toxic workplace or away from addictions, we have to change the environment. We have to surround ourselves with people that are living the life that we want to live. But, and there's a big but there, is we have to find the people that are living the life that we want to live, but how we want to live the life. Because there's a lot of people that have a lot of money, a lot of property, a lot of, big houses and cars that I want, but they didn't morally get there, right? They're not aligned with me if that's the case. And so I've got to find people that align with my values, align with my morals, and surround myself with them as much as I can.
Y'all, if you are listening, just hit pause and go rewind and re-listen to that last point that Erik just made, because that's some of the best advice that I learned the hard way and didn't start implementing in my life until the last handful of years or so. Is if you're going to listen to somebody, make sure that they have what you want in life in all areas, right? Not just one. Like finances is just one area of life. But like Erik said, a lot of people that have some financial success, but maybe they have several broken marriages and some other things in their life, right? That maybe you don't want. So you got to make sure you got it all together. And this is tough. I know one of the entrepreneurs I follow, Ryan Pineda, has been talking a lot about this recently, kind of coming out with a lot more Christian messaging. Did you grow up in any sort? I know obviously like actual experience wise, you were experiencing probably an unchristian environment, but did you have any sort of Christian influences in your early upbringing?
Yes. We went to Sunday school. My mom's parents were really involved in the church that we went to as a kid. They stopped going to church when I was about 10 years old, but it was my dad's grandma that actually turns 90 this year.
Wow.
That she has been praying for me my entire life. Like, she is the motivation for me to draw closer to God every day. She still wakes up every morning, drinks her coffee, and tries to memorize. She's been doing this for years, tries to memorize over 100 verses out of the Bible. And so every morning she just says these out loud. And she has, and I'm the second oldest of 20 or 19 first cousins, but altogether she's got 55 great grandkids and great great grandkids and grandkids. Is just this massive, family that she's created. But she was the influence for me that I truly believe that she is the one that has prayed and protected me my entire life, man.
Wow. Prayer's powerful. I think we Christians take it lightly, right? And I don't think, maybe you experienced this as a dad, but I didn't understand I don't think I understood prayer until I had kids. Because I was laying one night with my daughter in bed, putting her to sleep. She's 3, going on 4. I got a new one on the way, by the way. So I'm gonna have.
That's awesome.
I'm going from 1 to 2, which is a big leap, I've heard. So
now you're on man-to-man coverage, man. You're good.
Exactly, man. 1-on-1. So or 2-on-2, I guess. But so we was putting Aria to sleep one night, and this was when she was really young. Just started talking, and she was talking to me. And just, half words, half not words, just a bunch of gibberish. And I was just laying there, just like completely in love. And I just couldn't listen to her talk like all night long.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, man, this is what our loving Father wants us to do, is just come to him with whatever. And the Holy Spirit's going to pray for us with words that we can't even comprehend, but, we're asked to pray. And, if even the Son of God, Jesus, spent a lot of time going away to pray, and he's God, right? You think we probably should do it, as he tells us to, but I don't know. I think we kind of take it like people pray before their meal, whatever, but they don't seriously think like, hey, you know what? Grandma praying for you all the time, it might have something to do with the fact that God's keeping you so away from getting broken bones and through all that crap you've been through, Erik?
Yeah, man. I tell you, that's my non-negotiable, man. Like, immediately when I open my eyes at 44 years old, the first thing I say out of my mouth audibly is thank you, Jesus, for another day to see and hug and hold my family. Like that's the very first thing I do. And then to make my bed and I get 2 wins in 15 seconds. So in my mind, I'm already stacking wins. Right. But then the big thing for me immediately after that is I come upstairs to my office after, I go work out downstairs, but I come up here and I have to do this, but I come in, I turn on worship music and I just spend time in prayer. My prayers are very gratitude driven, right? So it's like, man, I'm just thankful to be alive and what we have. And my wife, my kids were all healthy. Right. And so just spending that time of prayer, that's that non-negotiable. And sometimes it's just listening. Right. And sometimes just quiet and listen to the worship music I play, man. And I think that's so important for sure.
I love it. Sounds like you're a man of many morning routines. Did you just start that later in life or have you been doing that for a while?
So I've been waking up at 4 a.m. for about 10 years now. And so I get up at 4 a.m. typically 5 days a week. Saturdays, I won't set an alarm, but I'll still wake up by 4:30 or 5. Sure. But I like to get up and get my morning routine done as soon as possible. So for me, this year in 2024, I'm doing 101 push-ups every single day. So I'm having fun doing that. And then spend time in prayer. And the reason I get up so early, people are like, why did you wake up so early? My desire to be successful as a dad, as a podcaster, as an entrepreneur is bigger than my desire to sleep. And so if I can get up and have that time where I'm growing in myself, my personal development, and I'm not cutting into family time, because as soon as they wake up, then it's like full on, let's go make stuff happen. Right. But that early morning hours is really where I can draw close to God for me. And that's my personal time. Now that means that I'm not going to bed like at 10 o'clock at night. Usually it's 9 or 9:30. I'm like, I'm falling asleep on the couch. Right.
Yeah. You're exhausted. Right.
Totally.
You know, it's funny. I haven't been doing it for 10 years, but since Christmas this past year, so a couple months now, I've gotten up every morning at 3 a.m.
Wow.
But I go to bed pretty religiously at 9.
Okay.
So I plan for 6 hours, and there's been a couple days where I have to travel or I got to do something, and I'm up till 1 in the morning, and I'll adjust my schedule accordingly. But what I found is for me, it's a time trade. Right. Because like I was saying, kind of getting rid of some of those old habits. Like I really got into a habit of in the evenings, enjoying a drink or two and sitting up, wasting time, staying up late.
Yeah.
And so I decided, hey, look, I'm unproductive at night and I'm like super productive in the morning. So I've got to trade that time. So I traded my evenings from 9 to midnight of like extremely unproductive time. And now like you said, by 8 p.m., I'm like ready to hit the hay. I'm tired. Right. But I've had a 16 to 18 hour workday, right?
Wow.
Of nonstop go and time with the family and whatever. Right. So I love it. 10 years of it, Erik, is very impressive.
Thanks, man. Impressed. Yeah, it's fun, man. Sometimes.
Yeah. Right. It's never easy, but what brought you to the Erik Allen Show and podcasting? Is it just being around all these entrepreneurs at your church, or?
Yeah, it's interesting. So in 2012, I started a company called Top Rated MMA, and it really was a MMA apparel company that my wife and I started.
Did you do MMA?
No, I didn't. I've always been a fan. Grew up watching kung fu movies and wrestling and all that stuff, and UFC 1 and 2 as an early kid, but so I've always been a fan. But so we launched it kind of the days of Tap Out when that was kind of big, and I said, hey, maybe something will come of it, and so we launched out in the Seattle area. My wife and I, our very first event, we hired a guy that he was a fighter on the Ultimate Fighter show named Jon Albert. And so he came and he stood at our booth and he wore our gear and we did photos with everybody and no one knew who we were, but like, why the heck do they have Jon Albert, the Ultimate Fighter guy, on the show? And we sponsored the main event and it kind of took off faster than we thought in regards to followers. Like, so our Twitter kind of took off at the time. I started getting calls from Jeremy Stevens' team at the UFC. They're like, oh yeah, you can sponsor. It's $50,000. I'm like, dude, I spent like a quarter of that. Like, not like I spent like maybe 1% of that to launch this thing. Right. But so I did that for a couple of years, but I got bored of the apparel side in 2015 and I kind of just sat on it for 2 years. And then in 2017, I said, I really want to stay involved in MMA, but I don't want to do the apparel side. So I just said, I'm going to start interviewing MMA fighters. And so I just started reaching out to local fighters and said, hey, hop on my podcast. I'd love to chat with you and talk with you. Why do you want to get punched in the face? That was like my only basis around that. I had no idea what I was doing. I was in a walk-in closet,
right? Bad
lighting, bad microphone, And I did that from 2017 to 2021. And then in 2018, though, was really when I heard Ed Mylett for the first time. I was searching for motivational videos on YouTube, and I was like, dang, who's this guy? Like, this guy, man, he's awesome. It's hard to just like sponge watch all of his stuff. And I said, I want to talk with entrepreneurs like that, man. I want to talk with people like that. Because I look at it like entrepreneurs, you know, kind of similar to MMA fighters. When they get punched in the face, they keep going. And entrepreneurs, we get punched in the face all the time, but we keep going. Right. And so that was my initial concept of it. Was like, I want to talk with entrepreneurs and talk about those struggles and what they got through. And, so now I've been able to, you know, been blessed to speak with Ed and Ryan Pineda and, you know, Bradley and Jon Gordon and a bunch of other awesome folks, man. And so it's been a fun journey.
That's super cool. I love Ed. You actually remind your energy and kind of the way your cadence, the intensity, it reminds me of Ed. I like it.
Oh, thanks.
It's really cool. And you made an interesting point about entrepreneurs getting punched in the face. This is something that I actually, in my new, you know, I'm a fairly new entrepreneur type journey. I've struggled with this because in my athletic days, it's very physical, right? Sure. And there's a lot of like, you know, playing football. Okay, you get knocked down. Well, you can get like you can kind of force things with physicality. Yeah. And when you're in, you know, a more business type of setting, right? It's different, and you can't always be as physical. I mean, there are people like the Andy Frisellas of the world that are still pretty intense, right? But then not every situation allows for that. So I've struggled with that a little bit because I think I relied a lot. I'm a bigger guy, like 6'3", 250. Like, you know, I relied on my physicality a lot.
Sure.
In my early leadership experience in sports and being captain of football, baseball, basketball, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't really get in your, you know, getting in your teammate's face in sports is a little different than what you encounter in the corporate world, is it not?
Oh gosh, totally, man. Yeah, I've always you know, loved the sports side of stuff, and I'm your typical average dude, 5'9", 180, right? Like just over 200 pounds now. Been putting on some muscle and trying to get rid of some dad bod stuff, but like essentially, I'm the average white guy at 5'9". But you know, it's a much different world as entrepreneurs because we take the beating mentally, right? Typically, it's not physically. We're not getting punched in the face physically. Hopefully, not. But we have to decide, like, do we want all the naysayers and the haters that are going to come at us to sway us away from our purpose, right? Because the people that are trying to talk us out of our purpose, they don't have the same vision as us, man. And so we have to battle through that, you know. And I like to go back to look at, we talk about Noah, right? I mean, here's Noah. He's hearing from God to build this boat in the middle of the desert. And everyone's like, dude, you're crazy. Why are you building this boat? You're wasting time. You're wasting resources. You know, he's like, there's no flood coming. And these people are trying to talk him out of his purpose. And the funny thing was, God said, bring your wife, bring their sons, and bring their wives. But he didn't say, bring your neighbors, bring your friends, bring your family, right? Like, you know, don't bring your in-laws, right? Like he said, bring your wife, their sons, and their wives. That's it. And so he had to listen in and not listen to those naysayers. He kept on the purpose, man. And so I think as entrepreneurs, we have to do that same thing. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to come into our life and try to talk us out of our purpose, but we have to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. And I think of Noah's story is a great example of that. I'm glad you brought that up. I think a lot too about the marriage verse where it says a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's tough a lot for people. They're so influenced by their family, and it's you know, to be like Abraham and leave and, you know, go on your own and start your own nation. Talked a little bit about that recently in an episode. Like that's not easy to do. And to stand alone like that, but we're almost called to, I think. Am I way off?
No, I agree, man. I think, you know, I've had to have some very hard conversations with my family, my mom and my dad over the years, and even my in-laws. And, you know, when we came to Idaho, it was kind of the step for us to get away from chaos that was around us. And so when we came to Idaho, we didn't know anybody. We went down to Nampa near Boise initially and walked out there, and we rented a house sight unseen. Got down there, lived for 2 years. I landed a job that allowed me to work from home. And I realized that where we moved to was very similar to the city I grew up in. It was like this just deserty, ugly spot. And I said, man, where do you want to go, babe? And so we decided to come up here to the mountains. And so we've been here ever since. But, you know, the conversations that we've had to have with our parents over the years, you know, we've had to kind of put a stop to the communication and say, hey, look, we are now changing the legacy for our kids. We're breaking the chains of divorce, abuse, rejection, and addiction. And we're not going to allow you guys to influence us or our kids. And so we've had to put a stop to communication in a loving way, but still kind of say, hey, you know what? We're not going to allow you to come into our life anymore at this point. Like, I'm 44. I don't need my mama, right? Like I have a wife and kids, and I'm creating a new legacy for my kids.
Yeah, it's tough to do, especially since you want to love and honor your mom and dad.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know you did Tap Out Clothing, so I got to put this up. If y'all haven't yet, go check out goleadeverything.com/gear and grab some gear.
Come on.
How was the clothing business? What it sounds like you got out of it for a reason. What were your thoughts on being in the apparel biz?
I mean, for me, it was good. I was doing everything myself. So, I was designing everything. My wife was kind of the brains behind it, but I was working with a local print shop out in Seattle, and I thought, I'll just go get a screen print and start doing myself. But I bought all the equipment and realized very quickly that I couldn't just set that up in my house and just start screen printing. And so it got to be a pain in the butt. And then a couple years later, I bought a heat press, and I did a heat press version of the apparel for a while.
Okay.
But again, it just took up a lot of space and a lot of resources and a lot of money to keep up. And so I sold that and now just focus on that. But, I worked in the swag industry for the last 4 years. And so I still am a big fan of apparel and, all the junk that you get at conferences and stuff like that.
Right.
But I just said, you know what? I want to be on this side of stuff. I don't want to be in the involving side of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you took a different approach than just the Shopify store, right?
Yeah. I didn't even have a shop before. I was just doing it in person. I didn't even have a website where you could buy shirts from, man. It was very, I think actually one time, I think some dude in the UK bought a shirt and I have no idea who it was. I had set up it wasn't through Shopify. It was some like Wix.com or something like that. But it was, awesome, it was interesting.
You made me think earlier when you were talking about like getting up early and we were talking about entrepreneurs facing challenges and mindset, and one of the big mindset things I've been thinking about a lot, and one of the reasons I've been getting up at 3 a.m. and starting early, it sounds like I want your perspective on it because I'm impressed with, because clearly you've been doing the work for a long time. But, I hear Ed ask this a lot in his show. I love Ed, by the way. I listen to his show all the time.
Yeah.
And he asks, is the work worth it? He's always asking his guests that. And one of the things that I think anybody who's going down an entrepreneur journey needs to answer for themselves is, am I willing to do the work?
Yeah.
Because to me, that's really the at least for me, that's been the hardest thing, is like, okay, I know what it's going to take and it's not going to be easy. Mm-hmm. Like, am I really willing to go down this road and take that beating and do all these things you've been talking about? Did you ever go through a moment like that where you had to just kind of come face to face with reality of the work that's required?
Man, so many times, especially in the world of podcasting, right? Like I had no idea like what I was doing and how to edit and all that stuff. And now I do everything myself still, but yeah, it's an interesting world. And I do think that the work that you put in is worth it. For me, it is, because it allows me that freedom to grow personal development. And look, I've been a W-2 employee my entire life. I've never been a full-time entrepreneur. I've always done the side hustle stuff, but I've realized that the side hustle stuff, it makes me happy to be able to do that stuff. And so it's worth it for me to get up early, to work with clients. I do product videos for brands. So they'll send me their product. They want a 30-second or 1-minute video. I'll send it to them back. And I'm a level 2 seller on Fiverr and stuff like that. And so I enjoy that stuff. And so it's worth it for me to put in the work and to learn and stretch and fail and then keep going. And so that's like my passion is, outside of podcasting, my family, like I love being able to work with people, clients, and do videos and stuff like that. So yeah, man, the work is always worth it for me.
That's awesome. I use Fiverr quite a bit. I freaking love Fiverr. And
yeah,
I find many people don't even know about it. And I've even thought of doing, lots of people have kind of oddball skills that they can monetize via a platform like Fiverr. So, not that I'm necessarily looking to dedicate a bunch of time to additional stuff right now, but it's crossed my mind. Like, hey,
it's not like a something that takes up a lot of time, and I don't really advertise it. Fiverr does its own thing, advertising my own profile, but I've been on there, I guess, just like 10 years, but I really just got involved in the last probably 5 years where I really started being dedicated to it. And I've done just shy of $10,000. Extra cash. I'm like, hey, cool, man, we'll do it. So.
Yeah. Everybody's looking for extra cash these days, man. Times are tough. Economy sucks. Dollars going down. It's tough times. And I've seen people that they've actually built businesses around, services on Fiverr and make tons of money doing it. And it's pretty wild.
I've booked many sponsors on my podcast through Fiverr. I have a
Really?
gig on. Yeah. I literally have an offer on that says, hey, let me promote your brand, your product, your podcast on my podcast. And that's how I book sponsors on my podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
that's super cool.
Yeah. And it doesn't take me much to, throw their logo on my website and charge them $100 per month. Right. Like, I'm like, cool. Yeah, whatever,
Yeah. So Erik, how the heck do you grow a podcast, man? Because when I launched GLE, I did not launch GLE how if you want to launch a successful podcast, it should be launched. So I learned a lot and I'm still learning a lot of things the hard way. But what's the secret to this podcasting stuff?
Just don't quit. Yeah, I mean, everyone else will quit and you'll just move up the ranks. It essentially, I think the last stat I saw was like 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 7. So, I mean, if you can make it past 50 or 100, you're in the top, 5% in the world, right? But if you want to grow your podcast, the number one thing that I would recommend doing is get on other people's podcasts. And in 2020, I set a goal to be a guest on 50 podcasts. And because I was like, I want to go be a guest and I want to promote my show. And I finished that year with only 24. And I was like, dang, I didn't make it halfway. So I went into 2021 and I was like, I'm going to do 100 this year. Now, I also had 2 of my own podcasts at that time that was releasing each of those shows weekly. So I was going to release 100 shows combined between my 2 podcasts, and I wanted to be a guest on 100 podcasts. And I went into that year and I just said, we're going to make this happen. And at the end of the year, I was a guest on 107 podcasts and I released 100 of my own. And that's really where I started to see the hockey stick move on my podcast, right? That's where I really started to see it happen. And that's where, I got booked to go on Brad Lee's podcast. And, I've been, connect with everybody else that has been on my show that year, because I just made it a habit to just reach out to folks and say, hey, let's grow this thing. And so if you can do show swaps, if you can be a guest on people's shows, you never know who's going to listen. I was on a guest on a podcast out of Tennessee, a radio station listened to that episode, then called me and said, hey, we want to interview you. They put up a video of interviewing me and it hit 50,000 views in the first week. And I was like, dang, right? So you just never know who's going to listen to your show.
That's awesome, man. I love Brad Lee, man. He's a fun guy. I want to go on his show and talk to him about Jesus's name, because he's always talking about that.
Did you see the episode that I was on with him? He
went
into
check. I probably listened to it.
Dude, here's the
thing.
Did
y'all dive into that too?
Yeah, but I was not expecting it. So
blindsided you?
Totally blindsided me, dude.
I gotta look it up now.
So the funny thing was, like, Brad was on my show. I usually call all my big name guests and about once a month or once a quarter, and I'll just like shoot a message like, hey man, I hope you're doing great, man. If I can help you out with anything, let me know. And one of the videos I sent to Brad, I was like, dude, I'm doing this podcast tour. I'm trying to get on 100 podcasts this year. I hope you're doing good, man. And he messaged me back. He goes, Erik, fly to Vegas. I'll have you on the show. And I was like, what? I mean, mind blown, right? So I schedule the flight. I fly down. I get to Vegas at like 11:30 at night, check into my hotel. We record at 10 a.m. the next morning. I fly home. But I went down there and it was funny because he goes, well, so what do you want to talk about? I was like, well, crap, man, you invited me on the show. Like, so we were kind of chatting. I was like, I can talk about podcasting, launch podcasts. He's like, yeah, that works. And then we got in there and he starts asking me about God and God's name and like all this stuff. And I was like, dude, I am not a Bible scholar. So I cannot answer your questions. Right. Like he was like way over my head. There was about 15 minutes where I was like, is this real? Like, I'm not even in this interview right now. Like he's just on the soapbox,
Yeah, man, he gets stuck on some of those things, I think. But yeah, that's what makes him Brad,
Yeah, he was super cool. Absolutely great guy to hang out with. And we chatted afterwards and got to hang out for a bit before I left. But like, absolutely cool dude, man. But it was funny. After the recording, I immediately went, crap, did I dishonor God? Did I say anything that would have screwed things up or hurt people? Right. And then I went and watched it, and it wasn't as bad as I had put it in my head, but still, I was like, you could probably tell if you watch the video, like there was a moment where I went, oh crap, man, I have no idea what he's talking about right now.
Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of his stuff. I'm gonna have to go back and see if I've checked out your episode.
And Ryan Pineda and him had the same conversation about Jesus' name and stuff like that too. So
yeah, I've heard him on probably 100 episodes talk about it. And what grinds my gears is if he's really curious, he's seeking. He just needs to talk to better people about it. Like, they're not tough answers, right?
Totally.
So here's the explanation. Jesus' name, it's Yeshua, right?
Yeah.
And that means the one who saves. And so in Greek, where they wrote the New Testament in Greek, Jesus means the one who saves. And literally that's the explanation. They don't have it doesn't have that same meaning. So the Old Testament says Joshua, right? But that was in Hebrew. It was translated from Hebrew.
Yeah.
Versus Greek was the New Testament was in Greek. So, I mean, I think it's just a language semantics thing, but it's an interesting point and worth people being aware of.
Totally.
But I don't think it's something that gets stuck on, but I might be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. It was awesome. I had Ryan on my show too, man. Ryan, we chatted about, his faith and stuff like that, man. And he's another one of those just super cool dudes, man.
Yeah. Super inspiring. As I've branched into doing more and more things like the podcast, like you said, you just inspired me to 100 shows, 200 shows in 1 year. Like maybe I need to up my game, right? I need to maybe take it up a level. And then you think, oh, well, that's a lot of work. But what doing these things does, I've found, is it forces you to expand, right? Like it makes you get better at life in all areas. Because if you have to, or you're gonna just like drop everything, right?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So, and again, it's not easy, but it's pretty simple, just not easy.
Right. Yeah.
What's the future of Erik Allen Media, man? What's the vision forward? What do you got?
Yeah. So I'm getting into speaking. I wanted to step out from behind the mic. I've done a little over 500 interviews since I started podcasting. And so I said, man, I'm comfortable behind the mic, but I want to get in front of people. And so I got into Toastmasters about 7 months ago, man. And I'll tell you, it's the best decision I ever made. It's been so much fun to be part of the Toastmasters club out here. I've won best speaker a couple of times. I actually just recently won the competition for their table topics, which is like a 1 to 2 minute, like on the fly. I'm going to ask you a question. You got 1 to 2 minutes to talk about it. And so I'll be at a regional area competition here in next month to compete with some other folks, and I can move on to districts if I win that. But it's just been fun, man. I've been prepping for a big talk that I have coming up on March 8th, 9th, and 10th out here in Coeur d'Alene, and super excited to talk for 25 minutes on mindset, man, and help a bunch of people out. But it's going to be the biggest crowd that I've talked to. It's about 150 people will be there. And I love that it's in my hometown, so I can sleep in my own bed and then go down there and, talk and then come back to bed. But
right.
Really, really excited to be it. But yeah, I mean, future is do more public speaking gigs. I've written a book. First draft is done. It's in editing right now.
Awesome, man.
Hopefully it'll be out. I'd love to have it out by the summer, but I'm not quite sure exact time on that, but super stoked to release the book and just continue to put out great content. I'm actually going to be shifting the focus of my podcast also. So I've been talking with entrepreneurs, world changers, success-minded people, but starting in May or so, I am going to shift the focus to talk with men only. And ladies, I'm sorry, but for moving forward in May, it's just going to be dudes that I'm talking to, but it's going to be dudes of Christian faith that have families, that have work, or they're business owners. And I want to talk about how do you balance that, right? How do you balance your faith, your family, your fitness, right? Your finances. And then I want to hear testimonies. I want to share your testimonies. And so I'm going to shift the focus of my show slightly in May, but really continue to put out some awesome content and continue to grow the show, man.
That is exciting. I got some guests for you, so I'll send those your way. A couple that's been on my show, Greg and Jackie Francis.
Nice.
Have 6 kids, multimillionaire entrepreneurs, and they had 4 under 4 at one point, I think.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know how they do all the things they do, but they've gotten very purposeful and intentional with how they raise their children. And I met their children, and they're super impressive. So.
Oh, that's awesome. You also had a fellow Idahoan, Curtis Hoppy, on your show.
Yeah, Curtis.
Yeah, he's down in Boise. I've never met him, but my family and I we check him out all the time, man. He's a good dude, man. We like his music.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, Greg. I think actually it's really small world. Greg and his family just moved to Boise.
Oh, they did. Okay.
So I messaged them and connected Curtis and him. I don't know if they've gotten together, but
sweet.
Yeah, like just great people to know. And Curtis was great. Great talking with him. He was one of those that my family had listened to his music a lot, like a lot. Like he was, if I got my Spotify Wrapped, I think my top 5 songs were all Curtis Hoppy, because we'd always listen to it with our daughter. We went clean, good mindset type of music.
Totally.
And I just DM'd him out of the blue. And to your point, right? Like you'll never know who's going to do your show. So reach out to people and ask and you shall receive. Right.
Right. I mean, you just never know. I mean, I've never shied away from asking people on the show, and I've never been rejected. There's some people that have ignored it, but I've never had someone come out and straight up and say no. But that's how I book 99% of my guests through Instagram DM, and I don't send a text message to them. And here's a $1 million answer here for folks that are wanting to book big names, but don't send a text template to them where you're just changing the name and it's already written out, right? I literally pull out my phone and I'll do a 30-second selfie. And I'll be like, hey, Ed, what's going on? It's Erik out here in Coeur d'Alene. I know you used to live out here. You just released your book, Power of One More. I'd love to help you promote that thing. Let's have you on the podcast and talk about the journey of putting that book together. Right. Boom. Right. Send it to them. 30 seconds. That's it. Don't go over 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I send them that video and I don't send any text to it. So they're like, why is this person sending me video? 9 out of 10 times they're going to click on that video just to figure out what the heck that person wants to say. And that's how I've been able to book everybody, man.
Hey, it's a good tip. That's a good tip. You know, communication's morphing right now, Erik. I don't know if you've given any thought to this. I've been thinking about this recently.
Yeah.
Like, are we even gonna have phones in the future? Like, wasn't Elon just talking about this? How like everything's gonna be through like an app instead of like a phone? Like, you won't even need a phone signal.
Yeah, probably.
Did you hear
that? I didn't, but I just did a speaking opportunity with some folks. I talked to some insurance agents on how to leverage communication via video with your clients. Mm-hmm. And so my whole thing was talking about like this, you can talk to your clients without being on the phone. Like, are you using Zoom or GoToMeeting or, Google Meet or, I use Loom for videos to send to my customers. And that has been the biggest, I would say, game changer for me in building deep relationship with my clients.
Interesting. I've never even heard of Loom. What's Loom?
Loom is awesome. So you can do 25 videos up to 5 minutes each for free on their free plan. So then when you hit your limit, you just delete your old videos. But essentially what I would do, and I hate typing up emails. So for my clients for the last 4 years, they would send me an email and say, hey, Erik, how do I do this in the platform? Or how do I do this? And I would just jump in their account. I record a video of me actually walking them through it and then send them that Loom video. And it's just a link that they would click on, a video pops up and it's like, hey, Mr. Customer, this is exactly how you do that. Right. And that built and deepened so many relationships with my customers. They loved it. Like, massive. And I built all the training videos for the previous company I was with through Loom. They actually ended up upgrading our plan so we could go unlimited past the 5 minute marker. But Loom is awesome, man. You can just send them a link and I'm a big fan for sure.
Yeah. Just make a video and send a link. I love it. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
cool. Yeah. We just spent I'm always telling people, stop sending emails and stop leave if someone's going to ask you a question, just leave them even an audio message. I think is way better than trying to go back and forth via a text message. But video is even better, right?
Yep. I'm a big fan of using video, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm wondering too, will we get to the point where instead of you get emails from people that are the head of a company or whatever, you just start getting video messages. I think people have already started to do this a little bit, but just instead of letting people read into your text and tone and all that stuff, just put your face out there and say it.
I just did this recently with a company I was trying to chat with, and we're kind of still in talks about me possibly joining their team. But I had talked to the owner of the company on the phone, and then afterwards I sent him a video, just like I did where if I was booking somebody on my show, and I just pulled out my phone and did a selfie video and just was like, hey man, that was an awesome call. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to chat with you further. And I sent that to him via text. And then he sent me back an audio message. He was like, dude, I've never had anybody in my career send me a video like that, man. So I appreciate you. And it was this cool moment. I was like, dude, all right, I'm on to something, man.
Right. Man, Erik, I'm super impressed with your communication skills. I'm taking notes over here. You may have seen me writing some stuff down. If y'all are listening out there in the GLE audience, make sure you take some notes on this episode because Erik's dropping some good wisdom for you. If y'all aren't following Erik right now, Erik G. Allen, ERIK G. Allen on Instagram, go give him a follow. Go check out erikallenmedia.com and keep up with what he's doing. And Erik, everybody I have on the show, when I started the show, I was listening to Gary Vee at the time. And I have a feeling people go through phases. And I really like something Gary said a long time ago when I was listening to him in my early days. He said, everybody's only got 1 year of content. And so don't feel bad when you've binged Gary Vee episodes and now you've moved on to listen to somebody else because you've heard Gary and you're kind of sick of him, right? And that's kind of how I got with Brad Lee, right? I listen to a lot of Brad Lee. I love his stuff. but now I'm listening to Ed, or I'm listening to Andy, or I'm listening to Erik Allen. And,
Yeah.
you kind of move on and continue to grow and hear new people. But he had this really interesting perspective that was, you probably have only one picture of your great grandpa or your great great grandpa, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you probably have no clue even about the people before that. But our children and grandchildren and future generations probably will have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of episodes and hours of content of Erik Allen and Phil Swanson doing their podcast with awesome, amazing people. And they'll be able to look back, a couple hundred years earlier and be like, what was going on? What were they talking about? And hear from us and hear our heart.
Yeah.
And I just thought that, even if that was the only reason for doing the podcast, I think I would still do it. Even if it wasn't helping other people, even if there wasn't other benefits to it, even if it wasn't training me by meeting cool people, I would still do it. Right.
Yep.
And so, with that perspective in mind, I got to ask you the last question.
Yeah.
What would you want to leave What would you want to leave the future generations with today?
Man, I'll tell you, first of all, I love that you brought this up, because I don't know what my great great grandfather did. And I wish that I could go back 3-4 generations deep and hear his story from him. Right. And I can't, but you and I can do that for future generations down our tribe. They can look back and go, man, great great grandpa Erik was a badass. I got to hear a story from him directly. Right. And so that type of stuff is why I like podcasting. I love podcasting. There's, relationships and all that fun stuff that come out of it. But for me, it's legacy. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, the legacy that I want to leave for my kids is, I want them to know that I worked hard, and I wanted to fight for them always, to give them a better life than I had. And I think a lot of times in this lifetime, we may not see what we fought for. We may not see what we're doing for future generations. But I hope that they see, man, they tried to change the trajectory of the Allen tribe forever.
Right.
And I want to instill love in my kids. I don't remember my dad saying, or my mom saying, hey, I love you. I love you. I love you. Not very often. But I tell my kids probably 100 times a day, to the point where they're like, yeah, I get it, Dad. But I'm telling you right now that I love you, and I need you to understand that. I want them to understand that I'm here for them. And also, when I screw up, I'm going to own it. Right. So I want them to realize that I'm real, and I'm going to screw up, and I'm going to mess up, and they're going to see me and my wife arguing, but they're going to see us making up, and they're going to see us, dancing in the kitchen and things like that. Dad was a real dude, but he owned up to his mistakes, and he kept fighting for us to make it a better life. And so that's a legacy I want to leave, man.
I love it, Erik. Leadership is example. And you just described that very well, Erik. Leaving an example for your kids, for your family, for future generations. Everybody out there in the GLE network, thanks for listening today. Go follow Erik G. Allen on Instagram, erikallenmedia.com, and share the show as you go. Lead everything.